This is my audience. Say hello. This is me. Beer. It's what's for dinner. At least that's what the ancient Egyptians and medieval Europeans said, because they ate it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. For some, beer is an acquired taste, but for me, I love it. I've loved it since the first drink. It's become a huge part of the history of my life. And from my research, I've noticed it's a huge part of the history of civilization of man. I'll be touching on great moments in beer history. We'll look at beer's contribution to world history through cultivation, brewing, and distribution. The best brewed beverage had its start in Mesopotamia. According to AncientScripts.com, Lawrence Lowe's article on cuneiform and Discovery Channel's How Beer Saved the World, archaeologists found beer residue in clay vessels dating as far back as 8000 BC. This time in 8000 BC was called the Agricultural Revolution, or the Agrarian Era. During this time, man was separating from being hunter-gatherers, nomadic people coming up from Africa, to becoming cultivating farmers, raising crops, coming up with storage units, and even coming up with riding the wheel and the cart. It's a great time for mankind. But what were they cultivating? What were they growing? It was barley. Barley was a main part of their diet. And it wasn't for bread, it was for beer. They would take this barley and they would store it. So man came up with the wheel, the cart, record keeping, farming during this time because of beer. Or at least it had a great influence on this agricultural revolution. According to EgyptianMyths.net, ancient Egypt worshipped the god Re, who was the god of creating life, love, and beer. The Egyptians valued beer on a very high level. It was a part of their daily diet, and it was also a form of currency. A day's wages was 1 gallon of beer. Also, on the Egyptian mummies was found traces of tetracycline, which is an antibiotic. So the Egyptians were vaccinating themselves 3,000 years before Fleming got his Nobel Prize for discovering and isolating penicillin. Egyptians vaccinated themselves Egyptians unknowingly vaccinated themselves similar to medieval Europe, purifying their water. Medieval Europe was a time of dark, deathly, dying people. There was the water was contaminated from tanneries, and the people really had a hard life and didn't live past the age of 6, most of them. But they came up with a way to purify the water through brewing it and boiling off the impurities that were found in pond water or just regular water wherever they can get it. And so babies and elderly, whoever was in contact with water was in contact with beer, because it was the only pure form of water. Beer was also a main source of food for Europeans as they crossed to the Americas. It had a long shelf life and made their travels a lot easier. Instead of food spoiling, they drank beer, and it gave them the sustenance and the strength they needed. During colonial times, at a little tavern called the Green Dragon, which is still there today in Boston, beer fueled the Sons of Liberty as they discussed treason against tyrannical England. This beer-fueled posse raided the ships and threw these England's taxed tea into the Boston harbor, which was a part of spurring on the American Revolution. So beer had a big part in the American Revolution. In an article by D.W. Brooks, Louis Pasteur in 1857 was hired to a brewery to figure out why beer went bad. His conclusion was bacteria, so he came up with a process of pasteurization. This also led to germ theory and sanitization. In 1873, two Germans came to America with the new beer to America, but it was old since way back when, was a lager beer. And lager was cold. It was cold brewed. And they brought this beer, and it was in such demand in Colorado that the brewing company funded a Carl Van Lind to help invent refrigeration in a constant cold air so they can make this lager beer. According to the American Society of Engineers, a certain Michael Owens, a great man in history, a great inventor, invented the Owens AR bottle machine. This Owens AR bottle machine took away child labor from America within 6 to 10 years after its invention. It was funded, the invention of the AR bottle machine was funded by the brewing company, which helped end child labor in America, and also initiated the Industrial Revolution, which many would say the Industrial Revolution was spurred on by Ford, but it wasn't. Beer is an important part of history, and as the need for it grew, so did innovations and technology to facilitate that need. Beer has been with us from the beginning of man's civilized history, giving us the plow, the wheel, the cart, writing, refrigeration, the bottle machine, early antibiotics, pasteurization, which led to germ theory, which led to many other things. So when you raise your next beer, think about the history behind it. Cheers.
Almost done.